There's an old song in the labor movement called Bread and Roses, saying that we need bread, you know, the material things we need to sustain ourselves, food and shelter and clothing, but our life should also, we should have some roses in our life, you know, a sense of beauty or connection with other people, the emotional fulfillment with the relationships in our lives. And sometimes when one is so worried about just keeping body and soul together in terms of the material needs of life, some of the other aspects of life, emotional or social aspects where one looks for fulfillment, are denied as well. It's an interesting question, what is poverty? I mean, it's obviously an economic condition where one has insufficient income or less money than one needs to live with a degree of dignity and material comfort. Poverty continues to be a problem in Canada. It's a very persistent and problem. You know, the old saying, the poor will always be with us. Well, it seems to be the case. It's interesting to note that most of the social programs that we have now that we highly value really kind of were launched and or greatly enhanced in the immediate post-World War II period in the 1940s and 50s and into the 60s, where I think coming out of the experience of the Great Depression of the 1930s and of course the traumatic events of World War II in the early 40s, Canadian society had this sense that we're in things together, we can mobilize collectively with the government's assistance to build a better society. So that ethic, that kind of moral imperative to work together, to support one another, to build a collective society based on justice and equality, that was a real driving force, I think, behind the creation and the enhancement of social welfare programs in the middle of the 20th century.
What we're doing is just helping them to live and perhaps be their friend, give them a smiling face once in a while, that type of thing. I'm the executive director of the Waterston Center, which is downtown Regina. Work with homeless people, work with, we house some people who are on different types of pension, mental health issues, things like that. We're probably most commonly known for our hostel service, which is an emergency shelter where people can come and they can stay here for anywhere from a night to a week in our dorm. But we also have long-term rooms. We call them hostel long-term rooms, where folk will move in and they're looked after in terms of room and board. So they can stay anywhere from months to years, and we have some people here for years. Mostly males in the facility. Our dining room and our casual labor would cover both groups, but the rest would be male residents. Well, we want to be a safe gap for people. We want to help people to become functional in society. What we do is we just help a person to get off of the street, get themselves stabilized, get them connected with our labor program. Maybe they could find a job, and then hopefully some of them will find occupation and be able to move on from here. Well, we can provide casual labor services. We have a new room we've just set up. It's called an activity center. It's kind of a weight training, pool table, air hockey, you know, that type of thing. So pretty well, there's a lot of services. Above and beyond everything, we have chaplaincy services that if a person's interested in talking about their spiritual needs, then we look after that as well. Well, I think without saying, one of the most important things for any agency or service is to partner. Sometimes people think you need to do it all in one place, and that's not the way to do it. So as much as possible, we try to network. Well, I think volunteering with places such as, say, the Salvation Army Waterston Center or Souls Harbor or Marion Center, any of those types of operations is important because it helps people to understand what other people are going through. Because sometimes people are very unsympathetic towards people on poverty, and they become judgmental and think they're all bad people, where in actual fact that's not the case. Just they're disadvantaged, and many just have had some hard knocks along the way. We're predominantly employees. We have about 33 employees, but we do work or use volunteers as well, but mostly in selected areas. And one of the most important things with volunteers now is we have to get criminal record checks on anyone volunteering, just to keep everyone safe. Basically, after that, once they get their criminal record check, we give them a position description according to the area they're going to be working in, and we train them on site. We have some volunteers who might come just occasionally, once every so many weeks, and we've got some others who come on a daily basis. It largely depends on a person's schedule. You know, there's some people it's just not possible to put it in their routine. So other people, because they don't have the time, what they do is they'll make donations of, we'll say, goods in kinds, like food or whatever. They might donate to a facility in the city to help that way because they're not able to attend. So it's kind of wide open as to what people can do. The imperfect society is where someone is struggling and we look at that person and we think they're a horrible person. But if we realize as a society that, you know, we're all unique and we're all special and we just try to support one another and help out in whatever way we can, that to me would be maybe not perfect, but close to it.
Sometimes poverty can have very social and even personal, emotional implications in terms of one might be feeling that one has no sort of control over one's life or can't do things for personal enrichment. We've gone some distance in Canada towards establishing an ethic of redistribution and, you know, making sure that those with less have enough to live on, but we've certainly haven't achieved that goal in any full sense. We have statistics now that are quite shocking, that only 40% of people in the workforce are eligible for unemployment insurance. And every single social assistance rate for people in suffering the highest degree of poverty is way below the poverty lines. So despite some of the stereotypes, one doesn't live a good life on social assistance when one collects welfare.
Well, there are a couple of things, I think, where the food bank fits into the whole picture of addressing hunger and poverty in our community. First of all, our primary core business for many years has always been hunger. Hunger is a symptom of poverty. Hunger is not a cause of poverty. It's a result of people not having enough income to be able to provide good food and good nutrition for themselves and their family. So our role at the food bank has traditionally been to provide emergency food supply. We're not intended to be a family or an individual sole source of food. We don't have the resources, nor is that our intention. But we want to be able to ensure that nobody, in fact, goes hungry. That's one of the key things that we do to address the issue of hunger, which is, again, as I mentioned, a symptom of poverty. So one of our responsibilities is advocacy, and to advocate on behalf of those people who can't do it for themselves, and to advocate for good social policies, for income levels, for programs and services that in fact help people move from dependence to independence, from poverty to living in a more sustainable style. And the third area that we've really focused on at the food bank here in Regina, and I guess we're a little unique in this, is we recognize that long-term systemic solutions require long-term systemic effort. And so we've started to educate people, and we've increased our emphasis on training. We want to be able to help people develop good life skills, good employability skills, provide them with literacy skills, computer literacy skills, the things that they need to cope with when they enter into the workplace. If we can link people who come here for food, if we can link them into some training and development after we've met those initial needs, again, that's an important service that we can provide to families that come here. And if we can do that, even if it's one family at a time, if we can impact that just one little bit, who do we help? Well, we help that one family each time we help them make that transition. And I think that that's a really critical role for the food bank to play, and is one of the reasons why we've invested so heavily in the new facility we're located at, and why we've placed such a great emphasis on our training and development side of our business. Well, certainly the food bank is a community-based organization. Because we receive no funding from government or from agencies like the United Way to deliver our services, we require very strong partnerships across the community. We rely heavily on the corporate sector to help us with resources, whether it's volunteers or whether it's funding, whether it's staging events. We link very closely with a number of community-based organizations that would also serve the same customers that we would serve. And we have literally hundreds of community organizations that serve as referral agencies to the food bank. We work with many different businesses, corporations, institutions, schools, churches, community associations, government departments, in a variety of different ways to ensure that our operation is sustainable, first of all, and that we can make sure that we can provide access to services to people who need them. Well, we have more than 200 households that would come every day here. Those 200 households are going to walk away with 3 or 4 days worth of food, depending on the size of their family and so on. Over the course of a month, that's about 100 tons of food that we would distribute. So in any given day, we're probably putting through 4 to 5 tons of food that would be processed out into the community. Well, I think there's a variety of ways where people can impact on the issue. One of the ways, of course, that people can do it is volunteering. If we have a core of volunteers, it means that we can accomplish more and not have to obviously put out as much in terms of our resources, which enables us to translate that into being able to buy more food or distribute more food. Obviously, we can always use people's financial resources. Every organization will tell you that. There's no question that the charitable sector has assumed a huge amount of work and responsibility in terms of dealing with those who live in poverty. We believe, as a food bank movement across the country, that we'd love nothing better than to close our doors because we're no longer needed.
One thing that one can do on a very practical level in one's day-to-day life to combat poverty is to share your resources, make contributions to individual organizations that fight poverty or that assist poor people.
The Regina Anti-Poverty Ministry is an outreach ministry of the United Church of Canada that does anti-poverty advocacy and education work with and for low-income people toward the goal of a more just and equitable society. Well, we grew out of what was the Regina Downtown Chaplaincy, which for 25 years, from 1971 to 1996, acted to help the needs of low-income people in downtown Regina. So in our present form, we've been in place now a little over 10 years. January of '96 was when we were founded. Last year, 2005, we handled over 2,100 cases. There's a wide range of cases, of course. Some of the cases that we would handle, for instance, would be social assistance denials or cutoffs. They would be rental coverage, utility cutoffs and arrears. They would be provision of special needs, like special needs diets and disability allowances, maternity coverage and things like that. So yeah, it's generally because they're having a hard time accessing the income that they have an entitlement to, or that there's some special need that's not being met. We also do handle quite a few referrals to other charitable organizations. So people come to us for emergency referrals to the food bank, or in terms of emergency shelter, clothing, etc. So, and the other thing is that we do what we would describe as pastoral care, or being a listening ear for people who are dealing with issues and crises which aren't necessarily either advocacy or charity related, but we're basically there as a support for low-income people for the problems that they're dealing with. Well, very often people don't know where to turn when they can't meet their basic needs, and when they're dealing with systems which they feel have a great deal of power over their lives. And so it's helpful for them to have somebody there to be a support, to make sure that their rights are being taken into consideration, and that in fact they are receiving those things that they're entitled to. So it's certainly something that many low-income people had identified to the downtown chaplaincy, that the need for an advocate was very important to them. We have lobbied all three levels of government, from the municipal to the provincial and the federal. Just because the provincial government is responsible for many of the departments and levers which we think have the greatest effect on low-income people, whether it's community resources, income security, housing, disability issues, because that's where much of the policy is set, and it's the responsibility of those departments. Much of our lobbying is at the provincial level. At the national level, issues such as employment insurance, ensuring that the qualification periods that we move back to a system where people find it easier to qualify and have more adequate benefits is an important issue. Also, in terms of we continue to push for a national child care plan and for more supports for social housing. So those are key federal issues. That being said, however, we've certainly lobbied around municipal issues. We were quite active in the Regina Citizens Public Transit Coalition that pushed for a discounted bus pass for people on income security programs, or provincially subsidized programs. In fact, what we had called for was a $12 pass for all low-income people, including the working poor and students. What we ended up with was a $15 pass for people who are receiving 4 of the provincially subsidized programs. We tend to have more volunteer supports in terms of things such as fundraising supports for the organization, helping to organize benefits, helping to organize conferences around poverty issues. So those would be some of the ways that the volunteers would be active. One of the things that we found through public health research is that it's not the overall level of wealth in a society that determines the health of that society. It's actually the level of equality within that society. So the narrower the gap between rich and poor, the healthier the overall outcomes of that society are. So we think that we need to do more to narrow some of the gaps between rich and poor.
I think something approximating a perfect or utopian society would be based on justice, on human rights, and on environmental sustainability. We're all in this together. We have collective responsibility to one another. I guess in the Christian tradition, they talk about, I am my brother/sister's keeper.